she didn't come back changed. She came back undone. Not in the way people talk about when they return from the edge, the soft glow, the warmth, the reassurance that it was fine. What she was shown wasn't fine. 6 minutes. That's how long her heart stopped. 6 minutes in a cardiac unit in Columbus, Ohio on a Tuesday in April, while her daughter sat beyond the double doors, holding a magazine she wasn't reading. In those 6 minutes, something found her, not to comfort her, not to lead her somewhere peaceful, to show her something she had spent 54 years not seeing. And when she came back, when the defibrillators worked and the monitors beeped back and the nurses called it extraordinary, she didn't say a word. Not that morning, not for 3 years, because what she had seen wasn't something that fit inside language. It was the kind of knowing that reshapes everything, including the shape of the woman you believed yourself to be. This is Linda's story. Linda Myers had always been the kind of woman who made lists, grocery lists, to-do lists, lists of things she needed to say to people before she ran out of time with them. She kept 3 notebooks on her desk at work, one for scheduling, one for operational notes, one for everything else, and she filled them slowly and steadily, the way someone fills a life that belongs entirely to them. She was 54 years old in the spring of 2018. She had seen the principal of Westland Elementary in Columbus, Ohio for 9 years. Before that, she had spent 11 years teaching 5th grade in the same district, in a classroom just down the hall from the one she now administered. She knew that building the way some people know a family home, the draft under the east stairwell door, the bathroom on the 2nd floor where the fluorescent light took exactly 3 seconds to flicker on, the particular creak of the gymnasium floor near the far bleachers that told her, from across the building, that someone was trying to sneak in before the first bell. She had 2 adult children. Marcus, 31, was a structural engineer in Denver who called on Sunday afternoons and meant it. Claire, 28, lived 40 minutes away in Worthington, and they saw each other more often than either of them formally planned. Linda's mother had died 8 years earlier, after a second stroke that came quickly and was, by every measure, merciful. Her father had been gone since Linda was in her mid-20s. She had been divorced for 16 years. The marriage hadn't ended in catastrophe, just the slow recognition that they were better apart, and that waiting had only made it harder on everyone. She was not someone who gave her health much thought. She ran 3 miles a morning, kept her weight steady, and saw her doctor every January for blood work that came back year after year. Unremarkable. So when the tightness started, in January of 2018, during a morning run, a pressure in the center of her chest that came when she pushed her pace and disappeared when she slowed. She waited 2 months before saying anything. She mentioned it to her doctor in March. Her doctor ordered an EKG, then a stress test. The stress test showed something that warranted a closer look. A cardiac catheterization was scheduled. Routine, her cardiologist explained, a diagnostic procedure, the kind they perform every day, simply to rule things out. April 11th, a Thursday. The procedure was set for 9 in the morning. Claire drove her. They didn't talk much on the way. Claire had stopped at the coffee shop on 5th Avenue, the one Linda had been going to since before Claire was born, and brought 2 cups. without asking, because she already knew what Linda would want. They drove in the kind of quiet that doesn't need filling. In the waiting room, Claire sat down with a magazine from the rack near the window. Linda changed into a hospital gown, answered intake questions from a nurse with kind eyes and efficient hands, and signed the forms that said she understood the risks. Yes. No. Yes, I understand. She was taken through a set of double doors. The catheterization lab was colder than she had expected. She lay on the procedure table and watched the technicians move around her the way she had watched custodians set up for a school assembly. Unhurried, each person in their correct position, doing what they had done hundreds of times before. The cardiologist greeted her. The sedative they administered was mild. She was meant to remain awake, or nearly. She remembers the steady beeping of the monitors. She remembers thinking, briefly, that the overhead lights were very bright for such a quiet room. She does not remember anything after that. At 9:23 in the morning, Linda Myers went into ventricular fibrillation. Her heart stopped. The team responded immediately. Defibrillation shocks, emergency medications, 6 minutes and 12 seconds of sustained effort. At 9:29, sinus rhythm was restored. She was brought back. No one in that room knew yet where she had been. She came back to her body the way you return to a room you've left in a hurry. Everything in its place, nothing quite the same. But before that, before the defibrillator, before the voices of the medical team, before the ceiling of the catheterization lab reasserted itself as the world, there was something else entirely. Linda Myers could not identify later the exact moment of transition. There was the brightness of the procedure room, the beeping, the mild sedative, and then there was what she would spend years trying to describe accurately and finally settle on calling an interruption. Not darkness, not sleep. A place where continuity simply stopped. She was aware of her body on the table below her. She was aware of it the way you are aware in a dream, of a room you are standing outside, recognizable, real, but no longer where she was. She could see the table, the machinery, the cardiologist at work. She could see the back of a technician's head. She could see herself, the pale hospital gown, the leads attached to her chest, the stillness of her own face. She did not feel fear. She felt she would return to this word for years, finding no better one. Addressed, not spoken to. There was no voice, not in any form she could describe as sound. But there was something like attention directed at her, the kind that carries recognition, the way a teacher notices a student across a crowded hallway, not by calling their name, but simply by seeing them. She moved, not with any effort she could describe, not with legs or will. She moved the way understanding moves, from a question to its answer. Upward, she would say, though she knew the word was too small. Away and through and into something that had a different quality than the room she'd left. The space she entered was not dark. It was not bright in the way the procedure room had been, that functional brightness designed to make everything visible and nothing comfortable. This was different. Luminous, she would try to say, except that word implies a source, and she was never able to identify a source. It was as though clarity were the nature of the place itself, not something produced, something structural, the way temperature is the quality of a room before you've thought about it. She was not alone, not in any way she could point to. Not figures, not presences in any form she recognized from life, more like the awareness of being seen, of being met. She stood, if standing was the right word, in that space, and she felt for one long moment nothing but an extraordinary stillness. Not the stillness of a medical emergency, not the absence of sound, the stillness that exists before a question is asked. And then something changed. She would describe it years later as turning, not her body, not the space, more like a shift in the angle of her perception or the way your understanding of a situation changes, not gradually but all at once, when one piece of information rearranges everything you thought you were looking at. She turned, and what she was shown was herself, not a mirror image, not a memory playing back in sequence, something more specific and more difficult, her life as it had actually been, stripped of the story she had been telling about it for 54 years. She did not understand at first what she was seeing. The scale was too large, too immediate. Like being handed every letter you had ever written and asked to read them in the voice of everyone who had received them. She began to understand, and what she understood first was this: she had not been the person she thought she was, not in a dramatic sense, not in a way that would have been legible from the outside. She had been, by most measures, a good woman. She had worked hard, she had raised 2 children, she had kept her promises, or most of them. She had showed up for the people in her life most of the time. It was the other times she was being shown now. She did not expect it to be organized like this. When Linda had imagined death, on the rare occasions she'd allowed herself to, she'd thought of something like sleep, a fading, a release from the particular weight of being a person with obligations and a calendar and a car that needed its oil changed. She had not imagined this. The review, if that was what it was, did not feel like watching. It felt like being. She was not a spectator. She was inside the moments she was being shown. Present in them as herself, yes, but also present as the other people in them, feeling what they had felt, seeing what they had seen, from the inside of their experience. She saw herself at her desk, late on a Wednesday evening, grading papers after the building had emptied, and simultaneously she saw Marcus at 7 years old, standing in the doorway of her kitchen at home, holding a drawing he had made, waiting, not saying anything, just waiting the way a child waits who has learned that patience is more effective than interruption. She had looked up from the papers, she remembered. She had smiled. She had said, "Give me 5 minutes, Bud." She had always thought of that as a fine memory. What she was shown now was the 5 minutes. The drawing was of a solar system. He had spent most of a Saturday on it. He'd gotten the order of the planets wrong, and he knew it, and he'd been planning to ask her which one he'd misplaced, because she was the kind of person who would know. He waited in the doorway for 4 minutes and 20 seconds before putting the drawing on the counter and going upstairs. She had not looked up again. The moment dissolved. She saw herself at Marcus's high school graduation dinner, turning her phone over on the table just to check, and she was shown what happened in his face in the 2 seconds she was looking at the screen. Not hurt, just a small private adjustment, the kind you make so many times you stop knowing you're making it. Another moment dissolved and came. Claire, at 9 years old. The night before Claire's first speaking role in a school play. a production of The Wizard of Oz that Claire's class had rehearsed for 3 weeks. Claire had one scene, 12 lines, and she had practiced them in front of the bathroom mirror until she could say them in her sleep. Linda had promised to be there. She had fully intended to be there, and she had been there. But she had also, in the parking lot of the school, taken a call from the district office that ran 18 minutes long. She'd arrived in the auditorium after the play had started. She'd found a seat at the back. She'd told herself it was fine. Claire hadn't seemed upset. She'd waved from the stage. She'd gotten through her scene without missing a line. What Linda was shown now was the moment Claire had stepped into the wings, off stage, out of the light, in the quiet dark between the performance and the applause. Claire had stood there for a moment, still in her costume, and she had looked at the door at the back of the auditorium, the door Linda had come through, and her face. In life, Linda had never seen that face. She had not been close enough. She had not been looking in the right direction, but she saw it clearly now. It wasn't devastation. It wasn't the face of a child having her heart broken. It was smaller and more private than that. It was the face of a child filing something away, carefully, without drama, in a place she was building, without knowing it, to hold these moments. The place where you keep the things you've stopped expecting. Linda felt the weight of this, not as guilt, as knowledge. There is a difference. Guilt is a reaction to what you did. Knowledge is what you carry forward once you understand what it was. And what she understood in that luminous space with her heart stopped was that she had spent years telling herself the story of a woman who showed up. She had been shown with complete and uncompassionate accuracy the distance between that story and the truth. The review continued. Not everything she was shown was painful. There were moments in the showing that carried the quality of something she could only call grace. Her father's hands on her shoulders the day she graduated from college, his pride so large it seemed to reorganize the air around him. The specific weight of an infant Marcus against her chest the night they brought him home, his breathing against her neck, the absolute completeness of that hour, a long afternoon with her mother, 3 years before the first stroke, when they had sat together on her mother's back porch without speaking for nearly an hour. And it had been, without either of them naming it, one of the best afternoons of their lives. She was shown these things too, but they did not have the same effect on her, because she had always known those moments. She had kept them. She had returned to them over the years the way you return to something you know is valuable. They were hers, and they had always been hers. The moments she hadn't kept were different. She was shown them because she hadn't kept them. She saw Claire at 14 sitting in the passenger seat after a difficult day at school, something social, something painful, the way things at 14 are painful, sitting quietly, waiting for Linda to ask. And Linda, exhausted from a meeting that had run 2 hours over, reaching for the radio instead, not unkindly, just reaching for it. She saw herself returning a call from a neighbour while Claire was trying to tell her something, the specific way Claire had stopped mid-sentence, the way she hadn't said, "Never mind," she had simply stopped, absorbed the interruption, filed it. She saw Marcus at 16 showing Linda an essay he was proud of, not asking for feedback, just sharing it. the way teenagers share things they love only rarely and only when they trust. And Linda reading the first 2 paragraphs before her phone had buzzed, and she had answered it with one finger raised. None of these were crimes. None of them were even unusual. They were ordinary. They were the texture of a life lived by someone who was always slightly elsewhere, not absent, but distracted, not uncaring, but stretched thin, not choosing wrong exactly, just always halfway into the next thing. And then she was shown the accumulation, not the individual moments, but the pattern they had built over years, not a narrative. It wasn't told to her, it was simply present, the way a room's entire history is present when you understand how to read its walls. She saw what her children had learned very early to expect from her, and she saw what they had stopped expecting, and when, and how quietly. She saw the 2 of them learning not to ask for certain things, Marcus around 9, Claire around 8. Not damage, an adaptation, the way children adjust to the actual shape of the world they are given. No one was judging her. What she was being shown was simply what had been. She moved toward what she sensed at the far edge of the space, a warmth that was not warmth exactly, but something she recognized, the way you recognize a voice before you know why. Her mother. Not a form she could see clearly, not a figure waiting for her in a doorway. More like a quality that entered the space, familiar and unmistakable, the same presence she had felt in 100 rooms over the course of a lifetime without ever fully naming what it was. She moved toward it, and then she understood she couldn't reach it. Not a prohibition, not a barrier she was pressing against. Something more accurate. The understanding that there was something between her and that warmth she had not yet resolved. Something with the texture of an unfinished sentence. Not a task, not a duty. A conversation she hadn't had yet, with someone still living, and in that moment, with total clarity and without any voice telling her so, she knew she was going back. Not because she was sent, not because something commanded her. Because there was something she had not yet seen clearly from the inside. Something that needed her to be alive to feel. She does not remember re-entering her body. The return, she would say later, was not the experience of returning. There was the space, the luminous, still, uncompromising space where she had been shown those things, and then there was the ceiling of the catheterization lab, close and white and very bright, and a voice saying her name in a tone that meant, "You are here. Stay here." The first physical sensation she could identify was cold. Not the cold of a room, but a deeper cold, the kind that lives in the body after it has been through something structural. She was shivering, she realized. She was shivering, and someone had a hand on her arm and was saying her name again. And the monitors were loud. And the lights overhead were very bright, and all of it was exactly what the world is, insistent, material, immediate. "Mrs. Myers, can you hear me? Can you open your eyes?" She opened her eyes. The cardiologist was looking at her. He had the expression of a man who had done his job under considerable pressure and was now doing the professional work of settling back into routine. His mask was down around his neck. There was something in his face, not alarm, not relief exactly, but the particular stillness of someone who had just come through something he would think about for a while. "You're okay," he said. "We had a cardiac event. You went into an abnormal rhythm, but we were able to correct it. You're okay." She didn't speak. She heard him. She understood the words. But she was at that moment still located somewhere else in some way she couldn't explain. Not medically, not literally, but in the way that a person can be present in a room and entirely absent from it at the same time. Part of her was still in that space. Part of her was still seeing. She was moved to the ICU for observation. The room had a window looking onto a courtyard with bare spring trees. She looked at them for a long time. She was doing what a person does after something large, finding out what remains. What remained was something very quiet, not peace exactly, not the grateful collapse back into ordinary life that people describe after close calls. What she felt was a heightened attention, a sense that every object in the room had a specific weight she hadn't noticed before. The IV stand, the call button, the pale pillow beneath her head, as though she were seeing them for the first time. The hours that followed were administrative, blood draws, vital signs every 15 minutes. A second cardiologist came by in the early afternoon to speak to her in the careful, precise language doctors use when they want to be accurate without being frightening. A congenital arrhythmia, previously undetected, correctable. Not necessarily dangerous going forward, more tests would be needed. She would likely be hospitalized for 2 nights. She nodded at the appropriate moments. Claire came in at noon. She sat in the chair beside Linda's bed, holding a paper cup of coffee with both hands, not drinking it. She had the look she got when she was holding herself together in public, composed, attentive, doing the work of being fine so that Linda could see she was fine and could therefore be fine herself. "They said you might not remember much," Claire said. "I remember," Linda said. "Are you in pain?" "No." Claire nodded. She held the cup. The monitor beeped. "Was it scary?" Claire asked finally. "Not the way you ask a question when you want a specific answer, the way you ask when you want permission to know." Linda looked at her daughter. Claire's face was 28 years old and still, in certain angles of light, exactly what it had been at 9. At that age when children are all interior and you can see the enormity of what's living inside them if you know how to look. She thought about what she had seen. She thought about the wing of a school auditorium, a costume, a door at the back of the room. It was something, Linda said, and nothing else for 3 years. She was discharged after 2 nights. The cardiologist prescribed a beta blocker to regulate the arrhythmia. He discussed the long-term prognosis, which was good. He used the word lucky twice, and she understood that he meant it as a clinical assessment. The arrhythmia could have presented differently, under different circumstances, with different results. She nodded. She understood. She went home. She did not talk about what she had seen, not to the cardiologist, not to her GP, not to the colleague who brought food to her house the week after and sat with her for 3 hours and listened to everything except the one thing Linda was actually carrying. Not to Marcus, who flew in from Denver for the weekend and slept on her couch and watched old movies with her and was visibly relieved when she seemed, to him, like herself. Not to Claire, who called every day for the first month, then every other day, then settled into the rhythm they'd had before, as though everything were normal. Everything was not normal. Something had happened to her perception that she did not know how to describe, so she did not describe it. Whatever she would say would fall short. Whatever words she used would reduce it to something that sounded like a version of things people had heard before, and it wasn't that. It was nothing she had heard before. So, she said nothing, and she changed. The people around her noticed the changes without being able to name them. Marcus mentioned to Claire at some point in the first year that their mother seemed different, quieter, more attentive, somehow more present than she used to be. He said this with a small amount of unease, the kind that accompanies a change in someone you love when you can't identify the cause, because unnamed causes suggest the change isn't finished yet. Claire noticed things more specifically. Linda called more, not dramatically more, but a Tuesday afternoon call that would never have happened before now happened. A text that said only thinking about you at a random hour on a Wednesday. An invitation to dinner with no particular occasion attached, just dinner, just Linda at the stove and the kitchen table and 2 glasses of wine. Marcus noticed something different. In the spring of 2019, he had a difficult week at work. A structural calculation flagged by a senior engineer, the kind of mistake that could have been serious. He spent 3 days carrying it without saying anything to anyone. On the 3rd day, Linda called him. Not for any specific reason, just to talk. And after a few minutes she said, "You sound like you're carrying something. You don't have to tell me what it is." He told her about the calculation. He said later that he'd told her, not because he needed advice, but because she had called on exactly the right day and said exactly the right thing, and that had never happened before. Linda also stopped being late. This was the change Claire would mention first, much later, when she talked about the years between the event and the day Linda finally told her. Linda had been her entire adult life reliably 10 to 15 minutes behind schedule, not out of disrespect, just out of the particular way her brain engaged with time, always convinced there was more of it than there was. After April of 2018, she was early, not obsessively, just consistently, quietly early, as though she had developed an acute sensitivity to the value of arrival. She retired from Westland Elementary at the end of the 2019 school year. At her retirement dinner, she gave a short speech that was warm and specific and funny. At the very end, she said something the vice principal would still be turning over 2 years later, unable to explain why she couldn't set it down. "I spent a long time convinced I was showing up for people. I was. Just not always at the right moment." She moved through the 3 years that followed with a quietness that people attributed to age, to retirement, to the cardiac event and its aftermath. All of those explanations were available, and all of them were partial. The real explanation was that she was carrying something she didn't know how to put down, and hadn't yet found the person to give it to. The call came on a Friday evening in late October, 3 years after the event. Linda was sitting at the kitchen table, the same table she had sat at for most of her adult life, the one with the nick in the corner from a dinner party in 1997, reading a book she had been reading slowly for several weeks. The window above the sink was dark. The house was quiet in the way that houses are quiet when they've been lived in alone for a long time. Her phone was on the table face down. When it lit up, she saw Claire's name. She answered, "Mom." Claire's voice had a quality in it that Linda recognized immediately. Not distress, but the particular taut attentiveness of someone carrying something carefully. I had a dream last night and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. Tell me, Linda said. I was in a field, one of those fields that dreams make. Too green, too open, that kind of light that doesn't come from anywhere. And there was a woman standing at the edge of it with her back to me. I knew it was you. I walked toward you, and when I got close enough, I realized you were crying. Linda did not say anything. Not the way you cry, Claire went on, differently, the way someone cries when they're not trying to stop it. And then you turned around, and you looked at me, and you said, Mom, this is the part I can't get out of my head. You said, I saw it. I saw everything. The kitchen was quiet. I woke up, Claire said, and I don't know why, but I had to call you. I know it was a dream. I'm not trying to make it something it isn't. I just needed to tell you. A long pause on the line. I know, Linda said very quietly. You know what? I know what you dreamed. There was a silence on Claire's end with a specific texture, the silence of someone who has just realized the conversation has become something different than what they expected. Mom, what does that mean? Linda took a breath, not to steady herself. She was strangely entirely steady, but because she was looking for where to start, and the beginning was further back than she had ever said to anyone. It means, she said, that I've been holding something for 3 years that I should have told you, and I think you just gave me the door. Another silence. Are you okay? Claire asked. I'm fine, Linda said, and then, more than fine, I think I might finally be fine. Claire, Linda said, can you come over tomorrow? Yeah, what's going on? There's something I should have told you a long time ago. I want to tell you in person. A silence, longer this time. Is everything okay? Claire asked. I think so, Linda said. I think that's actually what it is. I think everything is okay. She hung up. If you've made it this far with me, I want to invite you to subscribe to the channel and follow us every day. What Linda was about to share with her daughter, what she had been carrying since that Thursday morning in April, is exactly what this channel exists to hold. There are more stories, more people who came back with something they weren't ready to see, and who needed years to find the language for it. Stay with us. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time after, looking at nothing in particular. The dark window, the overhead light, the book she wouldn't finish that night. She thought about the field in Claire's dream, the green that dreams make, the light that comes from nowhere. She thought about how Claire had found her there, standing at the edge of something, crying the way you cry when you're not trying to stop it. She thought about a girl in a school auditorium, standing in the wings in her costume, looking at a door. She thought about the space she had been in, 6 floors above, on a Thursday morning in April, with her heart stopped and something showing her, with total clarity, what she had missed. And she thought about how it had taken 3 years, and a dream her daughter had on a Thursday night in October to give her the door she needed. She was ready, finally, to walk through it. Claire came over the next morning. She brought coffee, the same shop, the same order, and she sat across from Linda at the kitchen table and she waited. Linda told her everything. She started at the beginning. The procedure room, the monitors, the sedative, the moment she realized she was no longer in her body. She described the space as accurately as she could, which was not very accurately, because language kept landing short of what she was reaching for. She described the quality of light that was not light, the sense of attention that was not a presence, the review that was not memory. She told her about Marcus and the drawing of the solar system. She told her about the radio in the car. And she told her about the school play. She told her what she had seen from the wings of that auditorium when she had not been there to see it. She told her what Claire's face had held in that moment, not as accusation, not as confession, but as something she needed Claire to know she had finally seen. Claire listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't cry. She sat with both hands around her coffee cup, the same posture she'd had in the hospital room 3 years earlier, the same one she'd had 100 times before across this same table, and she listened to everything, all the way to the end. When Linda finished, the kitchen was quiet for a long time. A long time. Linda had not known until that silence how much she had been braced for something. For Claire to say it was fine, it didn't matter. She didn't even remember that play. For Claire to be kind in the particular way people are kind when they want to close a conversation that's become too heavy. She had braced for the gracious exit. It didn't come. And then Claire said something Linda would keep for the rest of her life. She didn't say she forgave her. She didn't say it was okay. She didn't say she'd always known or that it hadn't mattered, or offer any of the reassurances that people offer when they're trying to make a hard conversation easier. She said, "I know you saw me." That was it. 4 words. Said the way you say something that is simply true, not with weight or performance, but with the quiet certainty of something that has always been waiting to be named. Linda didn't ask what she meant. She didn't need to. They sat there a while longer, not talking about it, not moving away from it either, just sitting in the kitchen in the morning light with 2 cups of coffee and the table between them, which was not really between them at all, and the kitchen held them both in the particular stillness of a moment that doesn't need anything added to it. We don't know in the end what happens in the 6 minutes when our heart is stopped and a person is somewhere else entirely. We don't know what the space was that Linda entered. We don't know whether the life review is something that actually happens or something a mind constructs in extremity to tell itself what it most needs to hear. We don't know whether what she was shown was true or whether it was something more than true, a kind of emotional accuracy that lives beyond what we normally mean by fact. What we know is this. A woman came back from the edge carrying something she wasn't ready to carry. She carried it for 3 years, quietly, and when she finally set it down. If this story reached you, if it touched something you recognize or opened a question you've been sitting with, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment. Tell me honestly what this brought up. And if you have a suggestion for a story we should explore next on this channel, put it there too. I read everyone. And if you know someone who needs to hear something like this, someone sitting with something they don't have words for yet, share this with them. 5 people you think of, that's all. This channel exists because the right story found the right person at the right moment. See you in the next one.